A woman never forgets the moment she realizes she's completely alone. The scream tore through St. Mary's Medical Center at 2:13 in the morning as Olivia Carter doubled over beside the maternity desk, one trembling hand gripping her swollen stomach, while the other reached desperately for her phone. Another contraction crashed through her body so hard her knees nearly gave out beneath her. The fluorescent hospital lights blurred above her head. Nurses rushed past with rolling carts and clipped voices, but all Olivia could hear was the ringing in her ear as Ethan finally answered the call. Loud music exploded through the speaker first. Laughter. Glasses clinking. Somewhere in the background, a woman giggled. "Ethan!" Olivia gasped, trying to steady her breathing the way the childbirth instructor taught her. "The twins, it's happening! I need you here." For 2 seconds there was silence. Then came the sigh. Cold. Irritated. Familiar. "Olivia, I told you I had an investor dinner tonight." Her eyes filled instantly. "I'm in labor." Another wave of pain forced her against the wall, her breath catching as nearby nurses exchanged worried looks. "Please!" Ethan lowered his voice like she was embarrassing him. "Women give birth every day. Stop acting like it's an emergency." Then the line went dead. Olivia stared at the screen in disbelief as her reflection trembled across the black glass. 8 years of marriage. 2 babies less than an hour from entering the world. And her husband had just hung up on her like she was interrupting his evening. Around her, the hospital smelled like antiseptic and cold coffee. A television mounted in the corner played muted late-night news while rain slammed against the emergency room windows outside. Olivia tried to straighten herself, but another contraction ripped through her so suddenly she cried out and dropped the phone onto the polished floor. One of the nurses hurried toward her. "Ma'am, where's your support person?" Olivia opened her mouth but no words came out. Because the truth sounded too humiliating to say aloud. He left. Her breathing became uneven. Panic crept into her chest as she felt pressure tightening lower and lower in her abdomen. "We need to get you upstairs now," the nurse said urgently. But before Olivia could respond, the elevator doors across the lobby opened with a soft ding. Every head in the waiting area turned at once. 5 men in dark suits stepped out first, moving quickly and speaking into earpieces. Then came the man behind them. Tall. Broad shoulders. Black wool coat damp from the rain. Alexander Hayes moved through the hospital lobby with the quiet force of someone used to being obeyed. The billionaire tech founder rarely appeared in public anymore after becoming one of the youngest CEOs in America, worth over $3 billion before turning 40. Nurses whispered his name immediately. Even exhausted patients looked up from their chairs. But Alexander didn't notice any of them. His eyes locked directly onto the pregnant woman struggling to stay standing beside the maternity desk. Olivia's face had gone pale. One hand pressed against her stomach while tears streamed silently down her cheeks. Then suddenly her legs buckled. Before her body could hit the marble floor, Alexander caught her. The entire lobby froze. Olivia barely registered the expensive cologne or the warmth of his coat around her shaking shoulders. She only heard his voice for the first time, low and sharp with authority. "Why is she standing here alone?" No one answered fast enough. Alexander's expression darkened as another painful cry escaped Olivia's lips. Then his jaw tightened. "Get a doctor," he ordered coldly. "Now." The maternity floor exploded into motion the second Alexander Hayes lifted Olivia into his arms. Nurses rushed ahead, clearing hallways while the squeak of hospital wheels echoed against polished tile floors. Olivia tried to apologize between painful breaths, but Alexander ignored it completely. His jaw stayed tight as he carried her through the double doors like she weighed nothing at all. 36 weeks with twins, one nurse reported quickly while jogging beside them. Blood pressure elevated. Contractions less than 2 minutes apart. Alexander glanced down at Olivia as another wave of pain crossed her face. Sweat clung to strands of blonde hair around her temples. And her wedding ring caught the harsh fluorescent lights every time her trembling hand reached for the hospital bed rail. "Where is her husband?" Alexander asked. No one answered. They did not have to. Olivia's silence said enough. The labor room was cold enough to raise goosebumps across her skin. Machines beeped steadily while rain hammered the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. A nurse helped position her on the bed while another strapped monitors around her stomach. The rapid sound of 2 tiny heartbeats immediately filled the room. Fast. Fragile. Alive. Olivia closed her eyes at the sound and tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Your babies are doing well, the doctor reassured her gently. But we need you calm, okay? Calm. The word almost made her laugh. Her husband was somewhere drinking champagne while she lay under fluorescent lights preparing to bring his children into the world alone. Across the room, Alexander stood beside the window speaking quietly into his phone. Even in silence, he controlled the atmosphere around him. Expensive watch. Sharp black suit. Calm voice that made people move faster the second he spoke. Olivia recognized him now, of course. Everyone in America knew Alexander Hayes. The billionaire founder of Hayes Technologies. Forbes covers. Television interviews. Rumors about billion-dollar acquisitions and private islands and political connections. Men feared him. Women followed him online by the millions. And somehow he was standing in her hospital room at 2 a.m. because she collapsed alone in a lobby. It made no sense. Another contraction hit harder this time. Olivia cried out softly, gripping the rails as the monitor numbers climbed higher. Instantly Alexander ended his call and crossed the room. What do you need? He asked the doctor directly. The physician looked startled for half a second before answering. Right now she needs support. Alexander pulled a chair beside the bed without hesitation. Olivia stared at him through shaky breaths. You do not have to stay, she whispered weakly. I know. His answer came immediately. Something about those 2 words broke whatever strength she had left. Tears spilled. Faster now. Embarrassing tears. Exhausted tears. I did everything for him, she admitted quietly while another monitor beeped overhead. I helped him build his company from nothing. I worked double shifts when we were broke. I sold my grandmother's jewelry so he could make payroll during his first year. Her voice cracked. And tonight he left me alone. Alexander said nothing at first. His eyes remained fixed on the heart monitor beside her bed. Then finally he spoke. Weak men abandon people when responsibility becomes inconvenient. Olivia looked at him in surprise. There was no pity in his voice. Only certainty. Outside the labor room, a pair of nurses whispered near the doorway. One held a phone tilted toward the other. Their expressions shifted instantly from curiosity to shock. Oh my God! One murmured under her breath. That is her husband. Olivia noticed immediately. What? The younger nurse hesitated before reluctantly turning the screen around. A social media story filled the display. Loud music. Neon lights. Champagne bottles lined across a rooftop table overlooking the city skyline. Ethan appeared in the center of the video, smiling with his arm wrapped around a tall brunette woman in a silver dress. Vanessa Blake. Olivia recognized her instantly. Ethan's marketing director. The woman, he insisted, was just a colleague. Then Ethan raised his champagne glass toward the camera while Vanessa laughed beside him. The caption underneath read, "Finally free." The room went completely silent except for the sound of the baby's heartbeats. Olivia stared at the screen like she had stopped breathing altogether. Her hands slowly moved to her stomach protectively. 8 years of marriage reduced to 12 careless letters on a disappearing story post. Finally free. The nurse quietly lowered the phone. No one knew what to say. Then suddenly the contraction monitor spiked violently. Olivia gasped in pain as the machines began sounding faster. Doctors moved instantly around the bed. We need to prep her now, someone shouted. Twin B is showing distress. Panic surged through the room. But through all of it, Alexander never stepped back. He remained beside Olivia's bed while the storm outside rattled the windows and the sound of 2 tiny heartbeats filled the freezing hospital air. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones carrying wounds nobody can see. The sound of the twins' heartbeats filled the labor room like a countdown as doctors moved quickly around Olivia Carter's bed. One monitor flashed uneven numbers while nurses adjusted intravenous lines and checked blood pressure readings every few seconds. Outside the windows, Chicago disappeared behind heavy rain and streaks of lightning. Olivia could barely focus through the pain building lower in her body, but she still noticed one thing. Alexander Hayes had not left. Not even once. Most powerful men disappeared the second situations became uncomfortable. Ethan always had. Business calls. Meetings. Investor dinners. Emergencies that somehow mattered more than she did. But Alexander remained standing beside her bed with his sleeves rolled back slightly, his expensive watch catching the pale hospital lights every time he reached for a cup of water or adjusted the blankets slipping from her shoulder. He spoke little. Yet somehow his silence steadied the entire room. "Twin B is still under stress," the doctor said carefully while studying the monitor. "We may need to move quickly if the heart rate drops again." Olivia nodded weakly even though fear twisted hard inside her chest. She was exhausted. Scared. Humiliated. And beneath all of it lived a deeper pain she had spent years trying to ignore. The realization that Ethan had stopped loving her long before tonight. Looking back now, the signs felt unbearable obvious. The missed anniversaries. The unanswered texts. The way he stopped touching her stomach whenever the babies kicked. The way he stared through her at dinner like she was already gone. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks again. "I am sorry," she whispered suddenly. Alexander looked over immediately. "For what? You should not be here dealing with this." Her voice trembled. "You do not even know me." For the first time since entering the room, something shifted in Alexander's expression. Not softness exactly. Something older. He glanced briefly toward the rain-covered windows before answering. "I know enough." Olivia frowned slightly through the contractions. Alexander remained silent for several seconds as if debating whether to continue. Then finally he spoke in a lower voice. "When I was 12 years old, my mother died in a hospital room almost exactly like this one." The words landed softly but heavily. Olivia stared at him in surprise. "My father was supposed to be there with her," Alexander continued calmly. "Instead, he was in Las Vegas closing a deal." The heart monitor beeped steadily between his sentences. "She kept asking the nurses when he was coming. He never arrived before she died." Olivia's breath caught. Alexander rarely spoke publicly about his family. Most articles described him as private to the point of obsession. Yet now his voice carried something painfully personal beneath its usual control. "After the funeral," he said quietly, "my father told everyone he was delayed because of weather." His jaw tightened slightly. The truth was he simply believed work mattered more. Olivia looked down at her stomach instinctively as one of the babies shifted beneath her hand. Suddenly Alexander's presence in the room made terrible sense. This was never random for him. Tonight had reopened something old and unresolved. Before Olivia could respond, another contraction surged violently through her body. She gasped sharply, gripping the rails while nurses rushed closer. "Breathe with me," one nurse instructed quickly. "Slow, deep breaths." But panic started building faster now. The monitor beside her flashed again, and this time the doctor's expression changed instantly. "We are losing Twin B's rhythm." The room exploded into motion. A nurse hurried toward the hallway calling for additional staff while another adjusted the monitors around Olivia's stomach. Metal trays rattled. Rubber saws squeaked sharply against tile floors. Olivia's pulse pounded in her ears. "What is happening?" she cried. "Please tell me what is happening." Alexander stepped closer immediately. "Look at me," he said firmly. Olivia's frightened eyes locked onto his. "Your babies need you calm right now." His voice stayed low and controlled. Despite the chaos around them. "You are stronger than you think." For one shaky second she believed him. Then suddenly the labor room door burst open. Everyone turned at once. Ethan Carter stumbled into the room smelling faintly of expensive cologne and rooftop cigar smoke, his tie loosened and rain dripping from his dark overcoat. Vanessa Blake followed 2 steps behind, wearing 6-inch heels and irritation written all over her face. Ethan froze the second he saw Alexander standing beside Olivia's bed. The entire room went still. Even the nurses stopped moving for half a heartbeat. Because every businessman in Chicago knew exactly who Alexander Hayes was. And more importantly, they knew what happened to people who ended up on the wrong side of him. Ethan recovered first, forcing out an awkward laugh. "What the hell is this?" His eyes moved from Alexander to Olivia and back again. "Why is he here?" Olivia stared at her husband in disbelief. Not because he finally came, but because somehow after abandoning her all night he still sounded annoyed. The silence inside the labor room felt colder than the storm outside. Ethan Carter stood near the doorway staring at Alexander Hayes beside his wife's hospital bed, and for the first time that night uncertainty flickered across his face. Vanessa Blake crossed her arms impatiently behind him, clearly irritated she had been dragged away from the rooftop party. Her silver heels clicked sharply against the hospital floor as she glanced around the room with visible disgust. "Seriously?" she muttered under her breath. "This is what could not wait until morning." Olivia looked at her husband, hoping for something. Concern. Regret. Even guilt. Instead, Ethan only loosened his tie further and sighed heavily like the entire situation inconvenienced him. "You are causing a scene all over the hospital," he said coldly. "My phone has been blowing up for 30 minutes. One of the nurses stared at him in disbelief. Olivia's lips parted slightly. "A scene?" she whispered weakly. "I am giving birth to our children." Ethan rubbed his forehead impatiently. "And the doctors are handling it, are they not?" The words hit harder than Olivia expected. Because deep down she realized something terrifying. Ethan was not pretending anymore. The careful mask he wore around investors and charity galas had completely disappeared tonight. This was who he truly was when nobody important was watching. Or at least he thought nobody important was watching. Alexander stepped forward slowly. Not aggressive. Not loud. Somehow that made the tension worse. "Your wife collapsed alone downstairs," he said evenly. "She has been here for hours." Ethan immediately straightened defensively. "And who exactly are you to involve yourself in my marriage?" The room froze again. Even Vanessa's expression shifted nervously because everyone knew you did not speak to Alexander Hayes carelessly. But Alexander's face remained unreadable. "Someone who happened to show up when you did not." Ethan laughed once without humor. "Right. The billionaire hero routine." He looked toward Olivia with irritation instead of concern. "Do you have any idea what people are already saying online?" Olivia blinked through tears. "Online?" Vanessa rolled her eyes and finally stepped forward holding her phone. "Your dramatic hospital collapse is trending locally because somebody filmed Mr. Hayes carrying you upstairs." She shook her head with annoyance. "Honestly, Olivia, this is embarrassing." Before Olivia could respond, another sharp contraction ripped through her body. She cried out, instinctively gripping the bed rails as the monitors surged again. The doctor moved quickly beside her. "Her blood pressure is climbing too fast." Nurses immediately adjusted equipment, while one checked the baby's heartbeats again. The room shifted back into controlled panic. Ethan looked visibly uncomfortable now, though not because Olivia was suffering. Because reality was becoming messy. Unpredictable. Public. "Can somebody just fix this already?" he snapped suddenly. Alexander's eyes darkened slightly at the word fix. The doctor looked up sharply. "Sir, your children are under stress right now." Ethan exhaled dramatically and looked toward the ceiling. "Of course they are." Olivia stared at him in stunned silence. 8 years together, and somehow she no longer recognized the man standing across the room. Memories crashed into her all at once. Ethan crying in their first apartment because the electricity almost got shut off. Ethan promising he would never forget the sacrifices she made for him. Ethan holding her face years ago, whispering that one day they would have a beautiful family together. All of it suddenly felt like scenes from somebody else's life. Then the labor room door opened again, and another nurse hurried inside carrying a tablet. "Doctor, you need to see this." The nurse turned the screen around. A video had already spread across social media. Footage from the hospital lobby showed Olivia collapsing near the maternity desk while nurses rushed toward her. Seconds later, Alexander appeared, catching her before she hit the floor. The comments beneath the video updated so fast they blurred together. "Where is her husband? Who leaves a pregnant woman alone? Is that Alexander Hayes?" Ethan's face immediately drained of color. "Give me that," he snapped, grabbing for the tablet. But the damage was already happening in real time. Another notification appeared. Then another. Then another. Someone had connected Ethan's rooftop party story to the hospital video. Side-by-side screenshots filled the screen. Him holding champagne beside Vanessa while Olivia went into labor alone. Vanessa suddenly looked nervous for the first time all night. "Ethan!" He ignored her completely, pulling out his own phone now as messages flooded in nonstop. Investors. Board members. Public relations executives. Olivia watched the panic finally appear in his eyes and realized something devastating. He was not afraid of losing her. He was afraid of losing his image. Across the room, Alexander noticed it too. His expression hardened with quiet disgust before he looked back toward Olivia just as another painful contraction hit. This time she grabbed his hand without thinking. And he did not let go. The truth about a man always comes out when a woman needs him most. The labor room felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls themselves could sense the pressure building inside it. Rain continued hammering the hospital windows while phone notifications exploded nonstop across Ethan Carter's screen. His face grew paler with every vibration. One investor after another. One board member after another. Public relations executives demanding explanations before sunrise. The carefully polished image he spent years building was cracking apart in real time. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice nervously. "Maybe we should leave before reporters start showing up." Ethan snapped his head toward her immediately. "Nobody asked you." The sharpness in his tone startled even her. Olivia watched the exchange through exhausted eyes while another contraction tightened painfully through her stomach. Yet strangely, the physical pain no longer felt like the worst part of the night. The real pain came from finally seeing her husband clearly. Not the ambitious young man she married at 24. Not the dreamer who used to kiss her forehead in their tiny apartment, while promising they would conquer the world together. That man was gone. Maybe he never existed at all. A nurse adjusted the monitors again and frowned slightly. "Twin B is still struggling." The doctor exhaled quietly before turning toward Olivia. "We may need emergency intervention if the heart rate drops further." Olivia's breathing became uneven instantly. Fear crashed through her chest so hard she almost could not hear the machines anymore. Alexander noticed immediately. "Look at me," he said again, calm and steady. She did. Somehow his voice cut through the panic every single time. "Your babies are fighting," he told her quietly. "So you fight too?" Ethan let out a bitter laugh from across the room. "This is unbelievable." His eyes narrowed toward Alexander now with growing hostility. "You really enjoy pretending to be some kind of savior, do you not?" The room fell silent again. Alexander slowly turned toward him. No emotion crossed his face at first. That frightened Ethan more than anger would have. "Careful," Vanessa whispered nervously under her breath. But Ethan was already too irritated and too embarrassed to stop himself. "I know exactly who you are, Hayes." He shoved his phone into his coat pocket aggressively. "Everybody in Chicago knows your reputation." Alexander's expression did not change. "Then you should know this is not the moment to test my patience." Ethan stepped forward anyway. "This is my wife. My family. Stay out of it." Olivia flinched slightly at the word family because nothing about tonight felt like family anymore. Alexander stared at Ethan for several long seconds before speaking. "A family is not something you abandon because it becomes inconvenient." Ethan's jaw tightened instantly. "You think you know me because of one video online?" Alexander's eyes darkened slightly. No. His voice remained low and controlled. I know you because this is not the first time you have sacrificed people for your own ambition. The air shifted immediately. Ethan's face changed. Just for half a second. But Olivia noticed it. So did Vanessa. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Ethan asked sharply. Alexander folded his arms slowly. 6 years ago you worked under my company during the North River merger. Olivia blinked in surprise. She had never heard Ethan mention Alexander personally before. Ethan looked visibly uncomfortable now. That deal has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this, Alexander replied coldly. You manipulated financial reports to protect yourself while blaming your own project manager for the losses. Olivia stared at her husband in shock. Ethan immediately scoffed. That is not what happened. But Alexander continued anyway. A man lost his career because of you. His marriage collapsed within a year. He ended his own life 11 months later. Silence crashed through the room. Even the nurses stopped moving. Olivia slowly turned toward Ethan, whose face had completely drained of color now. Ethan, she whispered weakly. He looked away immediately. That alone told her enough. Alexander's voice stayed calm, but every word landed harder than the last. I spent years watching men like you destroy people while pretending to be respectable. His eyes moved briefly toward Olivia lying exhausted in the hospital bed. Tonight I watched you do it again. Ethan suddenly exploded defensively. You do not know anything about my marriage. I know you're pregnant. Wife arrived here alone while you drank champagne with another woman. The words hit the room like shattered glass. Vanessa stepped backward instantly, humiliated. Ethan opened his mouth to argue again, but before another word came out, the heart monitor beside Olivia suddenly dropped into a sharp, uneven rhythm. Alarms burst through the room all at once. Nurses rushed forward immediately. The doctor looked at the screen and his expression changed instantly. We are out of time. Panic erupted across the labor room as staff prepared emergency equipment. Olivia gasped in fear, reaching instinctively for the nearest hand. Alexander caught hers immediately. Tight. Steady. Unmoving. Then, over the sound of machines and rushing footsteps, Olivia heard the doctor say the one sentence every mother fears most. We may lose one of the babies if we do not move now. A single sentence can change a woman's life forever. The alarms inside the labor room screamed through the floor as doctors rushed around Olivia Carter's bed with terrifying speed. One nurse adjusted oxygen lines while another called for the operating room over the hospital intercom. Twin B's heartbeat continued dropping across the monitor in sharp, uneven spikes that made every person in the room move faster. Olivia felt panic closing around her chest so tightly she could barely breathe. Please, she whispered through tears. Please save my babies. The doctor stepped beside her immediately. We are preparing for emergency delivery now. Bright surgical lights reflected across steel equipment trays while nurses unlocked the hospital bed wheels. Everything suddenly moved at once. Fast voices. Running footsteps. The squeal of rubber soles against tile floors. Olivia's hands shook violently as another contraction tore through her body. She looked instinctively toward Ethan, searching for comfort one final time. But he stood frozen near the wall, staring at his vibrating phone like the collapsing situation online mattered more than the woman carrying his children. Ethan, Olivia whispered weakly. He finally looked up. For half a second she hoped. Then his eyes shifted immediately toward the nurses again. Can we please handle this privately? He snapped under his breath. The entire internet is turning this into some circus. Olivia felt something inside her finally break. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Completely. Years of excuses collapsed all at once beneath the cold reality standing in front of her. Alexander saw it happen in her eyes. The moment hope died. The doctor turned sharply toward Ethan, holding a clipboard. Sir, we need authorization immediately in case complications escalate during surgery. Ethan blinked distractedly. What? Your wife and babies are at risk. We need consent signatures now. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face in frustration. Jesus Christ. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice nervously. Ethan, maybe let legal review anything before you sign. The entire room stared at her in disbelief. Olivia looked away instantly because humiliation burned worse than the contractions now. Ethan hesitated. Actually hesitated. Alexander's expression darkened with something colder than anger. Disgust. You are wasting time, he said sharply. Ethan snapped back defensively. This is none of your business. Another alarm burst from the monitor before Alexander answered. The doctor's face tightened immediately. We cannot wait any longer. Olivia cried out again, clutching her stomach while nurses prepared to move her bed. Ethan still had not signed the forms. The silence stretched only 2 seconds, but it felt unforgivable. Then Alexander stepped forward. Give me the papers. Ethan turned instantly. Do not touch this. But the doctor no longer cared about the argument happening in front of him. He cared about saving 3 lives. Sir, somebody needs to authorize emergency intervention now. Ethan looked trapped suddenly. Sweat appeared along his forehead despite the freezing hospital air. There are liability issues, he muttered weakly. Liability issues. Olivia closed her eyes as tears slid silently into her hairline. Alexander took the clipboard directly from the doctor without another word. The room went completely still. Ethan stared at him in shock. You cannot do that. Alexander signed calmly anyway. Bold, sharp handwriting across the emergency authorization line. I just did. Ethan stepped forward angrily. She is my wife. Alexander finally looked him directly in the eyes. Cold. Controlled. Unshaken. A husband protects his family, he said quietly. You abandoned yours. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Even Vanessa looked down at the floor. Nurses immediately began rolling Olivia's bed toward the operating room. The overhead lights streaked across the ceiling as they moved quickly through the hallway. Olivia's breathing became uneven again while doctors continued monitoring the twins. Hospital doors swung open one after another. Somewhere nearby, thunder rattled the building windows. Alexander walked beside her bed the entire time. Ethan followed several feet behind, still arguing with someone on his phone about media damage control. Olivia heard every word. Get the video removed. Call the board before markets open. I said contain this. Not once did he ask if the babies were alive. They reached the operating room doors within seconds. Nurses stopped the bed while surgical staff prepared inside. One doctor leaned over Olivia carefully. We need you strong for us, okay? Olivia nodded weakly through tears. Then suddenly her hand searched blindly beside the bed again. Alexander caught it immediately before she even spoke. She looked at him with terrified, exhausted eyes. Please do not leave them alone, she whispered. Alexander's expression changed for the first time all night. Something human breaking through the steel. They will not be alone, he promised softly. Then the operating room doors opened wide beneath blinding white lights. Nurses pushed Olivia inside as machines beeped urgently around her. Just before the doors closed completely, she heard Ethan shouting from down the hallway about reporters gathering outside the hospital. But over his voice came something else. Alexander Hayes stepping directly into his path and saying 6 words that silenced the entire corridor. You do not control this anymore. Some men lose everything the moment the world sees who they really are. The operating room doors slammed shut behind Olivia Carter while red surgical lights glowed above the hallway like warning signals in the middle of the stormy night. Doctors and nurses moved quickly behind the small glass windows, their voices muffled beneath the constant rhythm of machines. Outside in the corridor, the atmosphere felt completely different now. Colder. Tighter. Reporters had already started gathering downstairs after the hospital video exploded online. Phones rang nonstop. Security guards whispered into radios. And standing in the middle of it all was Ethan Carter, watching his carefully constructed life collapse notification by notification. This cannot go public before markets open. He hissed into his phone while pacing beside the waiting area windows. Rain streaked down the glass behind him, turning the city lights into blurred lines of white and gold. I do not care what it costs. Get the footage removed. But every second more videos appeared online. The original clip of Olivia collapsing in the lobby had already crossed 2 million views. Then another video surfaced. Security footage from the hospital entrance. Ethan arriving 40 minutes late beside Vanessa while his wife underwent emergency surgery upstairs. The comments became brutal instantly. Heartless. She deserved better. Who leaves a woman alone during labor? Vanessa sat quietly in the corner scrolling through her own phone with trembling hands. Her glamorous confidence from the rooftop party had completely vanished. People are finding my social media now, she whispered nervously. They are posting my address. Ethan ignored her completely. Across the hallway, Alexander Hayes stood near the operating room doors with both hands in his coat pockets, silent and unmoving. The harsh fluorescent lights reflected across his dark suit, while members of his security team kept reporters from entering the maternity floor. Nobody dared approach him. Ethan finally ended his call and turned sharply toward Alexander again. Are you enjoying this? His voice echoed through the nearly empty corridor. Watching my company burn because of some misunderstanding? Alexander looked at him calmly. A misunderstanding? Ethan spread his arms defensively. My wife went into labor. Unexpectedly. I was at a business event. That does not make me a monster. Alexander's expression never changed. No. His voice stayed quiet. What makes you a monster is that even now you are more worried about your reputation than the woman risking her life behind those doors. Ethan's jaw tightened instantly. Before he could respond, one of his executives suddenly rushed out of the elevator holding a tablet. The man looked terrified. Ethan, we have a serious problem. Ethan grabbed the tablet impatiently. His face drained of color within seconds. A new video had surfaced online. This one from the rooftop party itself. Someone had secretly recorded Ethan earlier that evening laughing beside Vanessa while holding a champagne glass. In the background, another guest joked about Olivia possibly giving birth tonight. Ethan's recorded response played loudly through the tablet speakers. Then hopefully the hospital has valet parking because I am not leaving this party early. Silence swallowed the hallway. Vanessa covered her mouth instantly. The executive looked physically uncomfortable standing there. Even the security guards exchanged glances. Ethan stared at the screen in horror as the comments updated beneath it by the second. Cancel him. Divorce him. Save those babies from him. Turn it off. Ethan snapped harshly. But the damage was already done. His phone immediately started ringing again. Then another call. Then another. Board members. Investors. Media outlets. His company's stock had already begun dropping in overnight trading overseas. The executive lowered his voice carefully. 3 major investors are threatening to pull funding by morning. Ethan looked completely stunned now. Not sad. Not guilty. Cornered. Alexander watched him quietly for several seconds before speaking. This is what happens when character finally becomes public. Ethan looked up sharply. Do not stand there pretending you are better than me. Alexander stepped closer slowly. I am not the man who left his pregnant wife alone to protect a party. Ethan suddenly exploded. You think she was perfect? His voice echoed through the corridor. Do you know what it is like carrying someone else financially for years? Listening to crying and complaints every single day? The words hung in the air like poison. Vanessa stared at him in shock because even she had never heard him speak that way before. Alexander's eyes turned dangerously cold. She built your life with you. Ethan scoffed bitterly. Please. Olivia was nothing before me. The sentence had barely left his mouth when the operating room doors suddenly opened. Every person in the hallway turned instantly. A doctor stepped out still wearing surgical gloves and a blue cap. His expression was unreadable for one terrible second. Ethan immediately rushed forward. "Doctor, what is happening?" But the doctor looked directly past him toward Alexander first. "We saved the babies." Relief swept through the hallway so fast Olivia's nurse began quietly crying near the wall. Ethan exhaled shakily with visible relief too. Then the doctor continued speaking. "But Olivia lost a dangerous amount of blood during delivery." The hallway went silent again. "She is stable for now," the doctor said carefully. "However, the next 24 hours are critical." Ethan looked pale again instantly. But before he could ask another question, the doctor spoke one final sentence that changed everything. "She asked for Mr. Hayes when she woke up." The most dangerous moment for a selfish man is when the woman he underestimated finally stops choosing him. Morning light slowly pushed through the storm clouds hanging above Chicago as St. Mary's Medical Center transformed into a media circus. Satellite trucks lined the street outside. Reporters crowded behind police barriers clutching microphones and coffee cups while headlines about Ethan Carter spread across every major news network in the country. Billionaire executive abandons wife during labor. Investors demand resignation. By sunrise, his company's stock had dropped 18%. Inside the hospital, everything felt quieter, colder, more final. Olivia Carter opened her eyes slowly to the soft rhythm of machines beside her bed. Her body felt heavy and distant beneath warm blankets while pale morning sunlight spilled across the room. For a few seconds she could not remember where she was. Then she heard it. Tiny crying from somewhere nearby. Her twins. Tears instantly filled her eyes as a nurse carefully wheeled two bassinets closer to the bed. "They are healthy," the nurse whispered gently. "A little early, but strong." Olivia stared down at them in complete silence. Two tiny knit hats. Two tiny hands curled tightly beside their cheeks. Noah and Lily Carter. The babies she almost never got to meet. Her breathing trembled softly as she touched Noah's tiny fingers. "Hi, babies," she whispered through tears. "Mama is here." Across the room someone stood quietly near the window. Alexander Hayes. He had changed clothes sometime during the night, but exhaustion still shadowed his face. Olivia looked at him for several seconds before speaking. "You stayed." Alexander glanced toward her calmly. "I said they would not be alone." Something inside Olivia tightened painfully at those words because they sounded more like a promise than anything Ethan had said to her in years. The nurse smiled softly before leaving the room, quietly closing the door behind her. Silence settled gently between them for a moment, while the twins slept nearby beneath soft hospital lights. Then suddenly the room television mounted near the ceiling switched to breaking news coverage automatically. Ethan Carter's face appeared instantly across the screen. Footage replayed from the rooftop party beside the hospital, video of Olivia collapsing in labor. The contrast looked brutal. Cruel. A news anchor spoke sharply over the clips. "Public outrage continues growing this morning after overnight footage revealed Carter Industries executive Ethan Carter partying with his alleged mistress while his wife underwent emergency childbirth surgery alone." Olivia slowly looked away from the television. No tears came this time. Only emptiness. Alexander reached for the remote immediately and muted the screen. "You do not need this right now." Olivia stared down at her babies quietly. "No," she answered softly. "I think I do." Her voice surprised even herself. Stronger somehow. More awake. "I spent years pretending things were not as bad as they really were," Alexander said. "Nothing." Olivia took a slow breath. "I kept thinking if I loved him enough he would become the man he used to be." Her eyes finally lifted toward Alexander again. "But last night I realized something." The room remained completely still. "A man who truly loves you does not need to be begged to stay." The words settled heavily between them. Then suddenly another voice interrupted from the hallway outside. Loud. Angry. "Ethan. She is still my wife. You cannot keep me out." Olivia's entire body tensed instinctively. The door burst open seconds later. Ethan entered looking exhausted and disheveled, followed closely by two nervous lawyers carrying folders and phones. Vanessa was nowhere in sight anymore. Ethan stopped the second he saw Olivia awake beside the babies. Relief flashed briefly across his face before frustration returned just as quickly. Finally, he muttered. We need to talk before this gets worse. Olivia looked at him quietly without answering. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. Lawyers are already discussing defamation because of those videos online. If we appear united publicly, we can still fix this. Alexander's expression darkened immediately. But Olivia lifted one weak hand, slightly stopping him before he spoke. She wanted to hear Ethan herself now. Ethan continued talking rapidly. We release a statement saying stress and emotions were high. We say the media exaggerated everything. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. Our children almost died. Ethan exhaled impatiently. And they are fine now. The sentence hit the room like ice water. Even his own lawyers looked uncomfortable. Olivia slowly turned toward the bassinets beside her bed. Noah shifted slightly in his sleep while Lily made a tiny soft sound beneath her blanket. Then Olivia looked back at her husband one final time. Not with anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. I almost died too. Ethan opened his mouth immediately. Olivia, do not make this emotional. Something changed in her face at those words. Calm. Final. She reached slowly toward the hospital table beside her bed where a thin stack of papers rested beneath her water cup. Then she lifted them carefully and held them out toward Ethan. Divorce papers. Signed only 30 minutes earlier. Ethan stared at them in complete shock. You cannot be serious. Olivia's voice remained quiet but steady. For the first time in years, she said softly, I finally am. The strongest revenge is not destruction. It is becoming impossible to hurt again. 6 months later, the ocean breeze rolled softly across the California coastline as waves crashed gently against white sand below the cliffs of Monterey Bay. Morning sunlight shimmered across the water while two tiny children laughed beneath a pale blue sky. Noah Carter stumbled forward unsteadily in the sand chasing a bright red toy airplane, while his twin sister Lily sat wrapped in a blanket near the picnic table, clapping every time her brother fell and stood back up again. Their laughter carried across the beach house patio like music. Olivia Carter stood barefoot near the railing holding a cup of coffee between both hands. The wind lifted loose strands of blonde hair around her face while she watched her children with quiet disbelief. 6 months ago, she almost never got to meet them. 6 months ago, she lay beneath hospital lights terrified and alone. Now the silence surrounding her life felt peaceful instead of empty. Behind her, glass doors slid open softly. Alexander Hayes stepped outside carrying Lily carefully against his shoulder, while speaking quietly to her about the seagulls flying overhead. The tiny girl stared at him with complete trust, one small hand gripping the collar of his sweater. Olivia turned slightly, watching them together. Something still surprised her even now. The way Alexander always warmed baby bottles himself instead of calling staff. The way Noah reached for him instinctively whenever thunderstorms rolled across the coast at night. The way Lily immediately stopped crying whenever Alexander held her against his chest. None of it felt forced. None of it felt performative. It simply felt safe. Alexander looked up, meeting Olivia's eyes briefly. Your son is attempting to conquer the Pacific Ocean again. Olivia laughed softly for the first time that morning. That sounds expensive. I can afford sand. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly and Olivia shook her head, smiling into her coffee cup. Moments like this still felt unreal sometimes. Calm breakfasts. Ocean air. Tiny baby socks drying beside luxury patio furniture worth more than her first apartment. Yet none of it mattered as much as the feeling growing slowly inside her over the past months. Peace. Real peace. Not the fragile, exhausting version she spent years pretending existed inside her marriage. Down on the beach, Noah suddenly fell onto the sand again, and immediately looked around for reassurance. Alexander stepped forward instantly. You are okay, buddy, he called calmly. Noah grinned and stood back up on tiny, shaky legs. Olivia watched the scene quietly as emotion tightened unexpectedly in her chest. Some men become fathers through biology. Others become fathers through presence. Her thoughts broke apart when her phone vibrated softly against the patio table. Olivia glanced down at the screen. Breaking news notification. Carter Industries files for bankruptcy protection after final investor withdrawal. She stared at the headlines silently for several seconds. 6 months earlier, that news would have shattered her. She would have cried. Panicked. Wondered how to save Ethan from himself one more time. But now? Nothing. Only distance. Ethan had lost everything slowly after the scandal. Investors walked away first. Then board members. Then public sponsors. Vanessa disappeared from his life before the divorce was even finalized. The internet moved on eventually, like it always did. But the consequences stayed. Olivia quietly locked the phone screen again without responding. Alexander noticed immediately. Bad news? Olivia looked toward the ocean instead. Old news. He studied her for a moment longer before nodding once. No questions. No pressure. Just understanding. Lily yawned sleepily against his shoulder while Noah ran back toward the patio covered in sand and triumph. Mama! He shouted proudly. I beat the waves! Olivia laughed through sudden tears and bent down to catch him in her arms. Tiny sandy footprints covered her dress immediately. She did not care. Above them, the morning sun climbed higher across the coastline, painting gold across the water, while somewhere far behind them a chapter of pain quietly finished dying. Alexander stepped beside Olivia, holding Lily carefully while the twins reached for each other between them. For one still moment nobody spoke. Wind moved gently through the air. Waves crashed below the cliffs. And Olivia finally understood something that once would have terrified her. The night her husband abandoned her was not the end of her story. It was the moment her real life finally began.